Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lord Gord Podcast. This is your host, Lord Gord. I'm giving you information that's factually correct and politically incorrect. And somebody's gonna hurt you the way you love to keep hurting me. They say, oh, Sheila, let me love you till the morning comes. Hey. Aha! So this week is going to be a light and fluffy week. I'm going to talk about one of my favorite video game franchises of all time, Street Fighter. All right, I'm going to talk about my history with the franchise, some of the ones that I've played, my favorites, and I'm just going to get into some details as to why my favorites are my favorites. So my history with Street Fighter comes with this cart here. This is Vanilla Street Fighter 2. That came out on Super Nintendo in 1992. I believe it sold about 6.8 million copies on the Super Nintendo. And obviously, I was born in 1993, so I didn't play it in its heyday. But in the late 90s, early 2000s, I used to play it with some of my cousins as they had Super Nintendo, and we put many hours into it. I also played a lot of Street Fighter 2 Hyper Fighting, which on Super Nintendo is called Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and I think on Genesis it's called like Championship Edition, but it's actually Hyper Fighting. I actually played that on Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. I had a cousin that had Super Nintendo, and we played it on that, and I had another cousin that had it on Sega Genesis, and we played it on that. And those games were really fun. We actually learned a lot of geography from those games. You know, they'd go Spain, USA, China, USSR, Russia, Brazil. We learned a lot of geography and the names of a lot of countries from those video games. I remember playing, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and I really liked Vega. You know, he was this guy with the mask, and he had a claw. He was just really cool looking. And I thought that it was really cool that you were able to play with the Grandmasters on Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and you weren't able to play with them on just vanilla Street Fighter 2. And what's funny about that is Vega was my favorite character then, but I play Street Fighter now, and I never use him. I typically use Ken. Ken is my favorite Street Fighter. I use Sagat. I like Sagat. Tiger, uppercut. If we're talking about Street Fighter 2 Turbo, I also like Guile. I love his voice on Super Street Fighter 2. Most Street Fighter fans don't like Guile's voice on Super Street Fighter 2, but I like, he says, Sonic Boom, ha, ha. He has a really light voice, and I think it was a troll job by Capcom. It probably wasn't a troll job, but that's the way I see it, that this burly American patriot has such a light, comical voice when he does his attack. I think it's funny. But a lot of people don't like it. But we put a lot of hours in Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter 2 Turbo. I mean, tons of hours, weekends, just playing these games for hours on end. And I don't recall playing Super Street Fighter 2 on Super Nintendo. I could be wrong, but I don't remember playing Super Street Fighter 2 until it came out on Game Boy Advance, and then I had an emulator on my computer, and I was able to play Super Turbo and Fight Akuma. We also had Alpha 3. I remember this when I was younger. We had Street Fighter Alpha 3 on PlayStation 1, and I think we bought that game because there was a program called Greatest Hits. I don't know if PlayStation 4 still has Greatest Hits. They probably do. But on PS1, they had Greatest Hits, and like the jewel case on the left side would have this green bar, and it'd say Greatest Hits, and we were able to buy it from KB Toys or something like that for $20. We put a lot of time into Street Fighter Alpha 3. I remember playing it a lot, but I can't remember how good I was. I probably was awful and probably couldn't do any of the special moves. I don't remember when I learned the special moves exactly, but I can recall playing like Marvel vs. Capcom in those games and understanding how the chain combo system worked. And once I understood that, I was able to do all the special moves, so on and so forth. And that was probably around 2004, 2005. Uh, I played the rest of the Alpha series, which is Alpha 1 and Alpha 2. I played those on emulator, Kawax emulator, and I played Super Turbo on that too. I remember Super Turbo was extremely difficult, so I didn't play that one much. And you were also, on the emulators, you were able to make save states. So when I'd fight Akuma, I would have to reload from the save state like 100 times in order to beat him. He was really hard. And I didn't have an arcade stick or a controller to play it on, so I was literally using the computer keyboard. On the right hand of the keyboard, you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the number pads. I use those for the punches and kicks. And then you have to use a directional pad to do the moves. So certain moves are really hard to do. And also playing the fighting games, to this day, I play on Sega Saturn here a lot. To this day, I put my punch buttons on the bottom and I put my kicks on the top. But whenever you play in the arcade, the punches are on the top and the kicks are on the bottom. And the reason I did that was because when I was mapping my buttons on the emulator, I mapped them wrong. So it had like the top buttons, I mapped them as the bottom buttons, and the bottom buttons I mapped as the top buttons. And I still play like that to this day. I do not play with my punches on the top. I play with my punches on the bottom and kicks on the top. So when I go to the arcade every once in a while, I have to acclimate myself to a new control scheme. But on Kawax, the emulator, I played Alpha 1. Didn't play too much Alpha 1, but I liked it. But the one I played the most, even more than Street Fighter Alpha 3, and this one became my favorite Street Fighter game, was Street Fighter Alpha 2. I had that on Saturn, as well as Street Fighter Alpha, which is known as Street Fighter Zero in Japan. And Alpha 2, I mean, the presentation for Alpha 2 was just incredible. I mean, I like the colors, I like the graphics, I love the stages, and I absolutely loved the music. I mean, the music was an upgrade from Street Fighter Alpha 1, and the music is far superior to Alpha 3. I do not like the music from Alpha 3 at all. And Alpha 2 has these great compositions and arrangements. I mean, they sound like they're being played by a band, but they have these really cool synthesizers, CPS2 synthesizers from the 90s. So just on that point, I'm going to play a little snippet from my favorite theme from that game, which is Ken's theme. Here it is. I hope you like that one. I'm also going to play my second favorite theme from that game, which is Dan's theme. Coming at ya! I hope you like that one as well. The last snippet of music I'm going to play from Alpha 2 is going to be one of the staff rolls. I mean, the staff roll is absolutely incredible. It is immaculate. When I first heard it and I saw the staff roll, you almost shed a tear just because the presentation and the music is so beautiful and it comes together so well. So I'm going to play a little snippet from my favorite staff roll theme from Street Fighter Alpha 2. So Street Fighter Alpha 2, to my knowledge, had 5 new characters. It also says it on here. Had 5 new characters. The new characters from added to Street Fighter Alpha series was Sakura. This is her first game. You had Zangief and Dawson from Street Fighter 2. You had Roland. He was from Final Fight. And you had Gen from the original Street Fighter. And then Street Fighter Zero here, the first Street Fighter, has Ken, Ryu, Guy, Sagat, Birdie, M. Bison, Akuma, Sodom, Adon, Chun-Li, and Rose. Street Fighter Alpha 3 actually has more characters than Alpha 2, but I mean, if you ask me on any day, I'm going to play Alpha 2 because the mechanics of Alpha 2 are much more similar to Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and also they have the custom combo system, and I kid you not, I didn't realize that you were able to do custom combos until like 6 months ago. I mean, I've been playing this game on and off for over 10 years, and I never knew you were able to do custom combos. I think I was watching a video online and someone was able to do it. But in Alpha 3, if you want to do custom combos, you have to pick like an ism in which you can't do regular supers. You only can do custom combos. But in Alpha 2, you can do all your supers, and you can do custom combos by inputting a certain button configuration. And also, there's no guard block on Alpha 2. And I just like the stages and the music much better than Alpha 3. Even going to the arcade at the Santa Monica Pier, they used to have Alpha 2. They didn't have Alpha 3. And at Family Amusement Center over by LA Community College, they had Alpha 2 and not Alpha 3. So everywhere I went, it was Alpha 2. I mean, a lot of Street Fighter fans prefer Alpha 3 to Alpha 2. But then you also have a lot of fans that like Alpha 2 over Alpha 3 because of the gameplay mechanics, the music, and the presentation. I also like this one a lot, Street Fighter Alpha. This is probably my second favorite Street Fighter game because it has chain combos, very similar to the Darkstalker series. So it's really easy and really fun to do combos. Like I like Ken, and you can do like 5-6 hit combos with no problem. Fun fact about Street Fighter Zero, or Street Fighter Alpha, Warrior's Dreams as it's called in the United States. It was originally going to be a Super Nintendo game called Street Fighter Classic, but then they were going to move it over to CPS-1 in order to sell more CPS-1 units, but then they ended up moving it to CPS-2 and helped them move those movements. And they had the A-Team, Capcom's A-Team was working on Street Fighter 3, which I think debuted in 96 or 97, the first Street Fighter 3, which wasn't liked at all. So Alpha was given to some of the newcomers, some of the rookies, and it was going to be a cheap spinoff, but it ended up being an extremely popular series, and it helped Capcom get rid of a lot of CPS2 stock because after doing, they did X-Men Children of the Atom, Marvel Superheroes, and Darkstalkers, and Super Street Fighter 2, they thought, okay, that was going to be it for the CPS2, and the CPS3 was going to be the future, so all our best guys are going to work on CPS3. And in actuality, the CPS2 was a lot more popular than the CPS3, so you had Alpha 2 come out to sell more CPS2 units, and that was so big that they eventually came out with Alpha 3 in 98, Alpha 2 was 96, and Alpha 1 was 95, and Street Fighter 3 was not very popular at all. I mean, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike ended up becoming more popular years after it was in the arcades. I mean, it came out on Dreamcast, and you had some of the diehards that liked it, but most people, especially the casual audience, wasn't really interested in it. And CPS2 had, the Versus series, which is X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, Marvel vs. Capcom 1, those games. The rest of the Darkstalker series. So the CPS2, I think, lasted a lot longer than Capcom originally thought it would. But this one, I was reading that a few of the characters, like Birdie and Rose, and I forget, so Adon is another one, like 5 of the characters were designed by one guy. Some of them come from the original Street Fighter, Birdie and Adon, but Rose was a new character. And these guys essentially had free reign to do whatever they wanted because it was seen as a spin-off. It was a side project. It was never going to be, it was never thought to be like this really big game. And Alpha, I think, is more popular than the Street Fighter 3 series. Maybe not now because Third Strike is popular among some of the diehards, but I think among the casual audiences, the Alpha series is much more popular. Uh, I would say after the Alpha series, I didn't play much Street Fighter 3. I mean, it was only on Dreamcast. I ended up getting a Dreamcast much later, like 2003, 2004. And I recall some of those games were expensive at that time because you weren't really able to get them on other platforms. So games like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 were like $50. And that was a lot of money for me when I was in 6th grade. I ended up getting a burned copy of Marvel vs. Capcom 2, but I didn't end up getting a Street Fighter 3 on Dreamcast until a year ago. And I played a little bit of it, and I played some of it in the arcade. It's okay. I mean, the graphics are incredible. I mean, the motion is so fluid. The animation is perfect. I mean, it's even better than the Alpha series, but it never really jived with me. I mean, maybe when I get the anniversary collection, the 30th anniversary collection on my Switch, and I get in the Third Strike, maybe I'll like it a lot more. I remember playing Mugen, it's like a custom fighting engine where you can just plug and play different fighting game characters from different franchises. You code it in, so on and so forth. I used to be big on that when I was in middle school, and I would code in some of the guys from Third Strike. I mean, the sprites were beautiful. And I used to code some of those guys, and they looked really cool. But just getting into Street Fighter 3 itself, I never really got into it. Street Fighter 4, I played a little bit of it on PlayStation 3. My brother had it. I played a little bit of it. But again, I didn't really like the music. Didn't really like the presentation. I mean, it looks cool, but it doesn't really match the charm of the sprite art from like the Alpha series. And the graphics and presentation from like Street Fighter Alpha and Street Fighter 3 and even Street Fighter 2, that sprite art is beautiful. And because it's hand drawn and it's animated by hand, it ages a lot better than the 3D. Like, I mean, I have Nintendo 64 games and I have all those CPS2 games on my Saturn, and I much prefer to play those CPS2 games on my Saturn, not only because I enjoy the gameplay more, but that art style ages a lot better because it looks like a cartoon. And though some of the graphics on Nintendo 64 were cutting edge at the time, they were pretty primitive 3D graphics, and they are thoroughly outclassed by what came after them. But the hand-drawn era really ended after, Street Fighter 3. I mean, they did Capcom versus SNK, and they put it on 3D backgrounds, and I've never been a fan of putting 2D sprites on a 3D background. But after that, sprite art was essentially done. I mean, Guilty Gear, I think, does sprite art, but in terms of Capcom, in terms of it being a big thing, it was pretty much done. So that's really my experience with the Street Fighter series. I mean, I have tons and tons of memory with it. I even remember making a CD of the soundtrack from Street Fighter Alpha 2 and listening to it when I was at school. I kind of did it on my own because you'd get teased for listening to music from video games, but I thought that the music from Alpha 2 was so good that it deserved to be listened to outside of playing a video game. And I still have so many of these soundtracks on my computer and on my iPhone, so I really enjoy the Street Fighter series. I actually have Ultra Street Fighter 2 on Nintendo Switch, and I've enjoyed that a lot. And I'll probably get the 30th anniversary series sometime in the future. But cheers to Street Fighter Alpha 2 and the great designers, composers, testers, and programmers that help make these games great and help create wonderful experiences for so many people all over the globe. That's the Lord Gord Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like it, subscribe on iTunes, subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Podbean, share it with your friends, leave a comment, leave a review. It'll do me some favors. Get the Lord Gord album, This Isn't TV, the Funk album. Get it on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Tidal, Watch the Lord Gord music video on YouTube. Donate on Patreon. If you're in LA, come to the Blues Jam every Tuesday night at the Airliner from 9 p.m. to midnight. It's 21 and over. Free admission. They have dollar tacos. If you can sing or play an instrument, it's open. So you can go up there and do your thing. And next week, I'm going to talk about a Lawrence Harrison book I read, Under Development is a State of Mind, the Latin American Case. I'm going to get a bit into the culture of Latin America, dependency theory, why most countries in Latin America haven't developed the way that the United States developed, and the primary culprit is culture, so I'm going to delve into that. And that's going to be a good one, a really interesting one, and I hope you guys are looking forward to it. Thank you for listening. I'm Lord Gord. I'll talk to you next time.